Time for a cooking challenge, and again, slightly different from what we've done before. This time I'm going to try to use the most unsuitable cooking appliance I can find. In the previous video, there was a limitation that was no cooking at all. This time cooking is allowed, but I'm going to be limited to using one appliance that creates heat to cook the food. And that appliance is going to be selected. Basically, I'm going to go to charity shops and look around for ideally the cheapest, but really the most unsuitable cooking appliance I can find. And then I'm going to use it to make 3 different dishes, and at least 2 of those dishes have to be not the purpose that the appliance was made for. That might be a little bit difficult if the appliance is something like a slow cooker or a steamer or a toaster. So I'm going to try to avoid buying that kind of appliance. I'm going to try to buy something that is a single purpose appliance and use it for different purposes. That's the only restrictions. No restrictions on ingredients, cost, time, energy, spices, sauces, whatever. Free for all across the board, apart from the fact that I have to use one most unsuitable appliance to make the dishes. That's the parameters. Let's go shopping.
I don't have a lot of footage from the shopping, just because it's not quite so simple to record video in small shops. But anyway, I toured a number of different charity shops in Dorchester to see what appliances were on offer. Not all of the charity shops even sell electricals. Here's a churros maker, basically a waffle iron with a different kind of cooking plate. That's £7.50 though, so let's keep looking. There's this steamer thing here for £6. I think it's supposed to be for steaming eggs. Quite an assortment of stuff at a charity place called Dorset Reclaim. In this photo, we've got an air fryer, a steamer, another steamer, a slow cooker, a couple of George Foreman lean mean grilling machines, another slow cooker, then underneath that a collection of waffle irons and similar. Most of these under £10. I was actually tempted by the waffle iron, but the trouble with that would be making anything that isn't a waffle. There was another churros maker, and I've actually been seeing a few of these around in the charity shops, which I think might indicate they're not very good. There was this little slow cooker for £5, which was very tempting, but as I mentioned in the preamble, it's a bit too general purpose, and that defeats the point of the challenge, really. This electric soup maker was interesting but not tempting, basically an electric kettle combined with a blender. Very much single purpose, but by no means the cheapest thing on the shelf at £10. Here's a chocolate fountain for £7.50. I've no idea if it's even possible to use one of these for actually cooking things, so not going for that. This interesting little multi-cooker worktop oven fryer thing here is £8.50, but it looks way too versatile to qualify. And then this double steamer for £6.50, which is a great price, but do I want to just steam things? I kept looking and eventually I found this.
Okay, here is the haul. A Giles and Posner cake pop maker. So this is there are a lot of appliances broadly like this, where you've got heated plates for making waffles or toasted sandwiches or whatever. This one is specifically for making cake pops. Little spherical cakes that you would then put on sticks and cover with chocolate and sprinkles or decorate in amusing ways. Cake pops were a bit of a trend a few years back. I don't know if they're still around. Anyway, so yeah, we've got a cake pop maker. I can see there is going to be a limitation here because these plates close together. So really, whatever we cook is going to have to be cooked inside of these little spheres. There isn't a lot of play. We might be able to do something where it's cooked. Maybe I can leave it open and just cook on this surface like a frying pan. I don't know. Anyway, I'm going to get this cleaned up. Oh, I should say, this has been pat tested for safety. This doesn't guarantee that it's safe, but at least it means they've checked the insulation and the earthing and things like that on it. This item is priced at £5. I actually paid £2.50 for this because this was in the clearance outlet. This is Wellmar Hospice. They have a load of charity shops across Dorset, and they also have several clearance outlets. This one was on a small industrial estate where all of the stuff that's unsold from the high street charity shops gets collected up and shipped off to, and it's actually probably for bargain hunters a better bet because you get the big collection of oddities and stuff that you might not see without going far afield. Anyway, so I paid £2.50 for that. Receipt is on the screen. So £2.50 is our budget spend, which is the cooking appliance. Now I've got to try and figure out 3 different things we can cook on this that are not cake pops. Now before I use this device, I'm going to give it a clean. I imagine the person who donated it to the charity shop probably cleaned it before they took it in, but I'm going to clean it again. It may be that the people in the charity shop cleaned it as well, but I'm going to give it a clean as well. The problem with these, well, this whole class of devices is, though, that the cooking plates don't come out. The hinge here is actually part of the same metal that the cooking plates are attached to, and the heating elements on the back are not a separate thing. Typically, if you tear one of these down, you're going to find that you can't take the cooking bits out. So cleaning is really a case of getting in there with a sponge and doing the best you can, and it never feels like it's quite enough. There is a bit more dirt in the top, so what I might do is just balance it that way up for a bit and put some soap and water in these holes here. But yeah, this is the problem with these devices, is they are notoriously difficult to clean because you can't take them out. A higher quality waffle iron or sandwich toaster might have removable plates. These don't. There are screws to disassemble it, but I'm very sure that if I took this apart, I'm not going to be able to actually get the plates separate from the heater in order to wash them. We will maybe put that to the test when I've finished this exercise. I don't really want to destroy it, but we might open it up and see how repairable and how cleanable it is after I've done the cooking part of this video. It does heat up during use, so it sterilizes itself, so I'm not, there's no bacteriological risk or anything like that. It's just, we don't want burnt remnants of food turning up in the next thing we cook. Alright, so I've got 2 eggs and then 25 grams of grana padano, that's a hard Italian cheese, finely grated, 25 grams of flour and 25 grams of diced cooked ham. I'm going to separate the eggs. So for that I will use a knife to crack the shells because I want to get the white in that bowl and keep the yolk separate. And that's the most effective method I've found. I have tried a few different methods for separating eggs, and honestly I find this method, although it's a bit messy, more effective than trying to lift out the yolks. Sometimes, depending on the eggs, that fails. In fact, you can see where I tossed that first yolk in there, it broke when it hit the bowl. Sometimes the yolks are just a bit fragile. We'll have just a little pinch of cream of tartar, and then we'll whisk these eggs until they're completely foamed up. Okay, and that's soft peaks, I suppose. Now, conventional wisdom has you folding things back into this whipped egg, but Adam Ragusa, I believe, has done experiments on this and assures me that folding in is no different to whisking. So anyway, we're going to try that. So we've got the flour, the egg yolks, the cheese, the ham. This is just going to get whisked again for 15 seconds until it's combined. That was probably less than 15 seconds. That was a bit more messy than folding in, mainly because I didn't put the whisks perpendicular. Now, I suppose I should have tested this first, but I didn't. So we've got a light on, that's a good sign. Now, I don't completely trust the non-stick on this appliance, so I am going to just ever so lightly oil the surface here. I'm going to try and get some in the top there as well. And I think you're meant to wait until the green light comes on, but because we're not making cakes here, I'm going to put it in now. So spoonfuls or something like that of this mix are going to go into the cavities. Wrong spoon. hear it sizzling now, so we're getting close to cooking temperature, I think, which is good because I've nearly filled them up. Now, you can be the judge, I think, of whether this is a cake. Are these cake pops? There's no sugar in them, there's no butter in them, it's not a cake mix, it is a souffle. But you be the judge. Have I deviated sufficiently from making cake pops? The question I suppose now is, how long do we leave those for? Well, the green light has come on, which is the weirdest green light. It's an orange neon light underneath a green lens. Anyway, and steam is emitting from the device. Do I dare open it? I think if I do, it's going to tear them in half. So I think I need to leave it for another minute or two. Now these have had about 3 minutes, and I think we might be getting close to done. I can smell toasted cheese now. So I think, gingerly... Oh, hey, how about that? I think maybe just another couple of seconds. Okay, well, there we go. I'll turn that off. And these are supposedly Soufflé Pops. Has it worked? Kind of. Don't know how well they're going to come out. Not bad, actually. Okay, well, I'm just going to leave the rest in there for the moment because I think we ought to deal with these while they're still piping hot. Let's have a look and see what we got. So, inside, fluffy, puffed, and fully baked. Fluffy and delicate. The salt from the cheese and the ham is all the seasoning it needs. Now, hate me if you wish, but I think a little bit of ketchup would not hurt at all. Those are really not bad. Now, due to their small size, they have cooked through completely, so there's no sort of saucy, gooey middle in there. Genuinely not bad. I've got a little bit of mixture left, so I think we'll power it up again and cook the remainder. Second batch didn't come out as easily as the first, and I think, so it does look like oiling the pan does make some difference, although I think I may not have cooked those quite as far as I did the first batch, so they haven't gone quite as firm. And we will see that, hopefully, if I open it up. Yeah, this one's a little bit more tender, and it's still not saucy inside, but it's moist. I still think it's rather good with ketchup. So yeah, Soufflé Pops, that worked at least as well as I hoped it would. But what next? So that was Soufflé Pops, not a bad calibration exercise. One thing it is quite clear is that this thing cooks quite fast, so we've got to be careful about what we put in here. We can probably overcome the rapid cooking by power cycling this machine. So, you know, letting it warm up, turning it off, letting it cool a bit, turning it back on, and get a longer cooking time at a lower temperature if we need to. Now you might be wondering also whether I could just put a pan on here and use that as a hot plate. That has crossed my mind, you know, so we could try to make soup on there, for example. There could be some detrimental effects from that. For one thing, each of these little holes has a raised rim around it, which means the bottom of the pan is going to tend to abrade the non-stick on that ridge. It also means the contact area between the pan and the hot part of the thing is just not a lot of contact area, so most of the heat would be radiating into the bottom of the pan. Might still work. The other thing is that then this top part of the pan here is getting hot for nothing, and there's nothing to sink the heat away. So I suspect the device might overheat. And again, that could damage the non-stick. So if we do use this as a hot plate, it's going to be the last experiment. So I thought what we do next is make some tiny pies. I've got some ready-made puff pastry, and I've been out and picked some blackberries. Blackberries are really good this year. And I've got a pear, nice ripe pear. We're going to have some soft brown sugar, 2 tablespoons, and into that I'm going to mix about half a teaspoonful of cinnamon. I'm going to make a couple of different types of pie. I'm going to make some little fruity apple and pear pies, but I'm also going to make some pies somewhat inspired by cinnamon buns or Belgian buns. I've got walnuts, currants, dates and raisins. Currants being just another kind of raisin, basically. And I'm going to chop that up as finely as I can. So I'm even chopping the raisins because
There's no time for this to soak. Ideally, if you're going to make mincemeat, you'd soak it overnight or longer. Not doing that today. So I'm just going to chop this dried fruit up, but really I just want to chop it because this is going to be a tiny pie, so the filling has to be quite finely divided. And then onto that, I'm just going to grate some apple. It's about maybe half an apple. And again, I'll just chop that together now. So that's one of my pie fillings. Now next we've got to prepare the crusts, and these will have to cook quite quickly, so I think I will end up rolling out this pastry thinner than it is as it comes out of the pack. Take about that much of the pastry onto that floured surface. Set the rest of it aside for a moment. I'm going to roll this out to about half the thickness it was coming out the pack. So we've got 12 pies to make. So I will cut one first and we'll just try that out. So yeah, that drops into there, but that's not going to seal properly at the top. So I will save that circle for one of the tops. The cutter we need is actually the next size up, which I think is that one. Now that does seem awfully big, but let's try that one out. Yeah, see, once that's pushed down inside the thing, that takes up a lot of the size actually, so that is the right size cutter. So I'm going to make 6 pies like that, so we'll cut 5 more of that size. Now with the other bit of pastry, I'll just trim that off there. And these trimmings, although you're not really meant to do this with puff pastry, I will form that back into a ball. That will be the bases. This is going to be the tops. And for this, we're going to make some cinnamon rolls. So spread out that cinnamon sugar on top of the pastry. I mean, ideally you'd have a bit of butter mixed with this as well to make it stick, but there's quite a lot of fat in the pastry. Okay, let's see how we get on with that. So I'll just fold that over, and now I'm going to try and roll that up to incorporate that cinnamon sugar. I'm going to let that sit for a little while, just so that sugar absorbs a bit of moisture from the pastry. And try and roll out this other bit of pastry that was the trimmings. So this is going to form the bottoms of the cinnamon roll pies, or maybe some of them. I might have to get a bit more pastry out of the pack. Okay, right, now this bit here, I don't know if this is going to work. I'm just going to chop a bit like that and then try to roll that out. Actually, I might just squish that like that. That's going to be the top of my pie. So I need to make 6 of those. Right, that's all of those bits. These 6 on this side are going to be the cinnamon mincemeat ones. So, going to fill in a bit of that stuff. Now, I'm doing this all when the device is cold, partly because obviously this would be very difficult to do if it's heated up, because it'd be cooking away as you're trying to work. But also because, as I say, I think this thing gets hot fast. So in order to get an even and slightly more gentle cook on this, I think we need to have it all assembled before we put the heat on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's number 6 there. So then each one of those gets the little mini cinnamon roll on the top of it. And I'm not going to try to join the pastry, I'm just going to crimp it. I'm going to hope that the crimping action of the machine does the job. And then each one of these is going to get filled with, well, I was going to put blackberry and pear in there, but I'm not sure there's even any room for pear, but we'll see what we can do. This is going to need some sugar. A little sprinkle of sugar in each one. I think I will grate the pear, because I don't honestly see how we're going to get it in the pie otherwise. So it's very mushy. And I have no idea
really. I don't know if this is going to work. We won't know unless we try. I'll eat the rest of that off camera. And then these are going to get their little crusts on top. And again, I'm not going to try to stick that down. The device has a crimping action, so in theory it will take care of that. What I am going to do though, just on one of these, to see what it's like, I'm just going to impress a little lattice pattern on the top at the edge of the palette knife. See if that makes any difference. Okay, that was a lot of faff, but tiny pies are ready to go. Let's just clear the deck. So here we go. I'll close that down. I am encountering a bit of resistance before it clicks shut. Power on. And I'm going to just start those for 4 minutes and we'll see what happens. I don't think 4 minutes is going to be nearly enough to bake that pastry, but I will check in on them after that time, and we may have to like power cycle, just so we don't burn them before the inside is cooked. Okay, well that's the 4 minutes up. Let's have a very careful look inside. Not bad. They have puffed up. I'm going to turn that off now and leave that for 5 minutes and then turn it back on for another 4 minutes. Now we're only about a minute and a half into that second phase of cooking and it is sizzling quite a bit and I can smell a little bit of, not exactly burning, but toasting. Let's have a look. Well, I think those are not far off done actually. I think we will be okay to leave them a bit longer. Okay, I'm going to call it about now. So that's had a total of about 7 minutes of cooking, which was split roughly in half with a 5-minute rest in between. Going to have to let that cool down now. I think if we go any further we're going to burn things. Some of these are undercooked, but some of them look relatively promising. I'm just going to let that cool down naturally with the lid closed because it hopefully will then just allow those to even out in their bake. Okay, so we've had 5 minutes of cooling now as well, and actually some of these look alright. The heating is obviously quite uneven here. The lattice I marked on top of the pastry hasn't made any difference at all. Maybe I should have scored it. I'm going to try and take these out because I have a feeling that if I leave them in there too long, the caramelised sugar is going to stick them firmly and then they'll break. So these are going to come out onto the cooling rack. And something sugary napalm. I'm not even going to attempt to open these until they've cooled down to nearly room temperature. So this is going to take a bit of cleaning, and I'm going to get some of that done while it's still warm and while this caramelised sugar is still not completely set. So there we go, pie pops and cinnamon bun pops. Not very evenly cooked, so there's one, I think that's borderline. I do wonder whether the pastry inside is going to be properly cooked. That's perhaps the most photogenic of the cinnamon bun pops. It does feel like it's cooked. Okay, now time for the all-important cross-section. That doesn't look too bad. Is it still a little bit too hot to eat, that one? Okay, and then this one. Yeah, there's a little bit doughy on the inside there, but overall not too bad. Okay, here we go. Tasting time. Cinnamon bun. No, actually, let's do the fruity one first because then the spices won't confound me. Wow, actually, pretty good. Quite reminiscent of a McDonald's fruit pie, but better. And my cinnamon bun, very good. Actually really good. And the pastry on the inside was not crispy, but it was not raw, just ever so slightly doughy, but it was cooked. Let's see if we can get a better cross section on this one. So we can see there's just a thin layer of puff pastry that's puffed up at the top, and the rest of the puff pastry is a little bit left behind. So pie pops and cinnamon bun pops. Really happy with both of those. Next I want to make some kind of pizza, or at least something that tastes like pizza.
So I'll need some kind of bread dough. I'm not going to make very much. 150 grams of flour, and any old flour will do for this. You could use strong flour. Strong flour will give you a more stretchy dough, but any old flour will do. That also needs a tiny pinch of salt. A tiny little splash of olive oil will also help. And then to 150 grams of flour, we need 90 grams, so 3/5 of the weight of liquid. So this is my yeast, which I've already bloomed, so that's going to be part of my liquid measure. So that's 66 grams, and then I just need to make that up with water until we hit 90. There we go. And that's going to be my pizza dough. Bigger bowl might have helped. Anyway, I'll just bring that together. Get the sticky bits dealt with. Then a little bit of oil on my hands, just so I can quickly knead that into a ball. Pick up all the scraps. And that's all the kneading that's going to get for now. So that I'm now just going to cover and leave until it doubles in size. So as I said, I want to make something that at least has the flavour of pizza. How are we going to cook pizza on this? Well, we might be able to cook something a bit like calzone, like a pizza turnover. So I'm going to prepare all of the ingredients so that they can be easily deployed into the little pockets. So we've got some pepperoni, and I'm going to cut that into small pieces. I've got some cheese. It is just cheddar, that's what I've got. So let's have a think about how much is going to go on each one. So maybe like that much cheese into each pocket. I've got some lovely fresh basil from the greenhouse. I've got some lovely oregano from the garden. This is the spring onion that I planted. You know, I chopped the base off a spring onion and tested growing it. Well, that's what it grew into. So I'm going to give that a wash and take off the rough bits on the outside, and we've diced that up. So yeah, that is just a lovely little white onion. And in theory, this basil plate that I've cut off, I could plant that again and it'll grow another onion. Anyway, for now though, I'm just going to chop that. Just dice that small so that it will cook quick and so that I can share it out evenly. Similarly with this basil, I think I'm going to have to chop this, which will bruise it, but that doesn't matter so much when it's being cooked. I'm going to put basil on tomato salad. It's best to tear it because then the leaves don't bruise and go dark. But if you're putting it in something where it's going to be cooked, that doesn't matter because that will happen anyway. Just chopped enough that I can share it out, and so the aroma will come out as well. And the oregano. And of course we're going to need some tomato. And I thought rather than make a tomato sauce, I'll just use these little currant tomatoes that I've got growing in the greenhouse. So I can drop a couple of those in each cavity. They'll cook and burst, and that should be enough. So those are the fillings. Let's get the dough ready. And it has doubled in size, so that's good. And I think this can be quite a bit rougher than the pastry was. I need to roll this fairly thin, so I reckon a piece of dough about that size might do it. So that is about 1/3 of my dough. I'll separate out another third because we're going to have the top as well. So, and I am going to use a rolling pin to roll this out. I know that's not an authentic pizza method, but whatever. And I want to try and get this as round as possible and fit as closely as possible to the size of the thing that I'm just looking over my shoulder to see how big that is. Okay. Pretty good. Right, and then yeah, we're just going to poke the dough down into the holes like that. I don't know, I think that might be a bit thin. I'll keep that over there, and maybe we'll use that piece for the top. I think maybe the piece that's in contact with the bottom we'll use a bit more dough. Roll it into a nice ball first, and keep rolling and turning, and that way we'll get a nice neat circle in theory. Yeah, I
think that slightly thicker dough is what we need. Okay, back again with this thing. I'm more comfortable with that. I think the dough is, when it was pushing down into the pockets, it was feeling a bit thin. So, just got to make sure it's going to go to all of the edges. So a little bit of onion, because I'm assuming most of the heat will come from underneath here. So the idea is to put the ingredients that need the most cooking at the bottom. Now a little bit of oregano in each one, that's probably too much in some of them. I suppose I can just scatter this over the top and it will be baked into the dough. I'm not sure we're going to get 2 of these in each one. Might only be 1. Okay. Yeah, I think when it comes to all the other things we've got to squeeze in there, it's going to get tricky. The pepperoni. A couple of little bits in each one. Very much like the pie pops. This is a bit of a faff. And I suppose this is the thing, is this probably highlights one of the major themes of this series, is that this isn't meant to be practical advice. Nothing you see me do on this series is meant to be practical advice. We'll have a little sprinkle of the basil, and I'm not going to bother trying to get that into the pockets. We'll just let that bake into the bread. Then the cheese. Are we nearly done? I think maybe just a little sprinkle of chili flakes. Do I need salt on there? We've got salty meat, we've got salty cheese, and there is a little bit of salt in the bread dough, but I think maybe just a little bit of salt and a bit of black pepper, because why not? So that's the bottom layer and the fillings, and then this dough layer will go on the top, kind of loosely-ish. Just a little dab of olive oil. Hopefully that'll let that crust crisp up a little bit. Okay, well, here goes nothing. I'm actually going to move this mat out of the way before I switch this on. Here we go. I think I might just let that cook open for a bit before I put this down. It'll take about a minute to start sizzling. So that's had the minute of preheating, and then that's going to come down gently. So we'll start the timer, 5 minutes to start with. And there is not a chance of this actually closing all the way now. It's not going to get to its point where it clicks down. And I can see some dough has extruded out the side here, which is not going to cook. So I'm going to trim that off and discard. Okay, 5 minutes has elapsed. Actually, it's not looking too bad. But I'm going to turn that off now and just let that cook as it cools, because otherwise we're just going to burn it without baking it. This has now had 10 minutes of baking. 5 minutes of that was warming up. The other 5 minutes was turned off and cooling down. It's looking kind of done-ish, but I think it's going to need that other 5 minutes. So we'll give it another 5 minutes heating up, and then it'll have obviously another 5 minutes cooling down at least. And I'm going to keep going until the bread around the perimeter doesn't feel doughy anymore. Okay, that is now the 5 minutes second cooking. So we'll turn that off. I think that's the oil has come out of the cheese there. I can see steam venting from the inside here. So definitely piping hot all the way through. I'm going to leave that for another 5 minutes now to continue baking as it cools down. So that's going to be 20 minutes in total on 2 5-minute heating cycles. And then we'll see what kind of result we've got. That's had the extra 5 minutes cool down time. It's now looking very toasty. Is it going to come off in one piece? Oh, it looks like it is. Okay. And it feels like it's baked. Okay. It's, I don't know, just something very, very absurd about that. The bread at the edges is cooked. A little bit soft there, but still definitely cooked. That's cooked like a naan bread or something. Well, there we go. That's still going to be way too hot to bite into or cut into at this moment in time, but what a delight. I'm going to let that cool down for about 10-15 minutes before we try to eat it. Okay, I think it's time to sample calzone pops.
Now it's interesting, there is no easy way to divide this into portions. The arrangement of these pieces is not symmetric. So whichever way we try to cut it, we're going to be, see, that would divide it into 7 and 5. Likewise, that would divide it into 7 and 5. Anyway, 7 and 5 it is. So definitely cooked on the inside. The crust is it's quite a thin crust, but definitely cooked all the way through there. That's a hopeful sign. I think I really need the bread knife for this. Okay, I'm going to go through here so we can get a cross section of those two blebs. And there we go. Kind of puffed up and cooked. It smells really good. The crust is a little bit tough, and I think that's where it's been cooked in compression. I mean, honestly, I think that's a bit overbaked as well. There goes the tomato. Let's try perhaps a slightly less overbaked example from the edge. Well, I think we could have got away with less cooking. Maybe 7 minutes total cooking, broken into 3.5 minutes on, 3.5 minutes off, and so on. I reckon we've probably gone a little bit over on that, but it still tastes really good. I'm not really sure the concept is good because it's just weird. And it doesn't break by hand easily at all. A little bit too toasty, but actually tasty. Toast. That's what's missing. Hello. So there we go, that's the 3 things I've tried to make which are not cake pops with this cake pop maker. Back to Studio Shrimp now for the scores, lessons learned and anything else.
Scores. Soufflé Pops. These are going to get a 6 out of 10. They tasted good. The second batch, cooked slightly shorter, was better than the first. Still not exactly soufflé, maybe more like savoury waffle. Maybe this recipe would have worked better in that waffle iron. Cinnamon Bun Pie Pops. These can have a 7 out of 10. The flavour balance was great. They just maybe needed a bit more finesse in the manufacture. Fruit Pie Pops. 8 out of 10. Delicate, beautifully fruity, and I think some of this is because their small size and rapid cooking preserved the delicate aromas of the blackberry and pear. Calzone Pops. Just unnecessarily weird. I don't even know how to give this a single score. Flavour was great, but it was overbaked, and that flat part of the bread was compressed and dense like a cracker. Not really all that much fun to eat, but I had trouble in stopping laughing at it. So there's that. I actually had to cut the video because I couldn't stop laughing at this ridiculous blob disc thing. 5 out of 10. If this had just been made in a regular toasty maker, I feel pretty sure it would have scored a 9. I did think about making some other things in this appliance. For example, trying to cook a full English breakfast with a bacon rosette in one hole, a ball of sausage meat or black pudding in another, potato rosti and so on. Maybe some small eggs and baked beans added to the last couple of cavities late in the process. But I think it would just be an unnecessary mess. I did also think about making the cake pops in the recipe from the instructions, but this is not a product review video. I might keep this gadget for a little while to see if there's any practical potential before I donate it back to the charity shop. So if you feel the urge to suggest something in the comments, and if I think it's worth trying, that might turn up in another video sometime. Conclusions. Limits can be limiting. It's right there in the name. You know, one of the most common themes in the comments in this series is something like, you can do anything if you try. And I think that's a great mental attitude to choose to apply to yourself. If you try, you can indeed overcome a lot of things. But there are still such things as limits. And sometimes the only real solution is to purposely remove the limit. Not to expect people to prevail by trying harder with the limit still in place. It was fun to try to cook with this nonsensical limit of the only appliance being a cake pop maker, and it's probably true that with a bit more effort I could have made some different and more diverse dishes. But no amount of trying hard is going to get, say, Christmas dinner cooked on this thing. There's just a limit to what's possible here. And so my thought for this particular day is that in a broader context, yeah, I can do anything if I try hard, is not a bad aspirational stance if you choose it. Whereas you can do anything, so you should try harder, is maybe toxic advice if it's given in a situation where a person is already hard pushed up against a genuine limit. And sometimes it's not the people facing limits that need to try to overcome them. It's us that need to try to help remove the limiting factor. I suppose the counterpoint to that is that some limits are self-imposed by choices, and certainly that would be true. But some limits, unlike the ones in this video, come from external factors. There's just one more thing to do before we go, which is to have a look inside this machine.
Okay, I'm done playing with this for now, and I don't want to destroy it, but I think we will just open this up. At least maybe just undo these 3 screws here and see what happens. It's not that screwdriver. Try this one. I think this will take the top case off, and then I think we'll see what the problem is with these devices in general. As I say, you can get waffle irons and sandwich toasters that have removable and sometimes replaceable plates, but those tend to be more expensive devices than this. So what have we got? So there we go. As you can see, you can't take, that's the backside of the cooking surface. This is a heating element. There's what looks like a little temperature sensor there. And then those are the 2 neon lights on the inside of the thing there. So there's, I mean, you could unscrew that. Yeah, I mean, I suppose you could unscrew all of these bits. They are all screw mounted. The heating plate is screw mounted to the underside of this casting. But yeah, look, there's bits of various people's recipes in here. Probably some of mine, but certainly not exclusively mine, because some of this is really baked. In fact, the hinge there is absolutely vile. So in that hinge there is just gack. I'm going to put that back together and pretend that never happened. But there you go. That's the problem with this category of, or this class of devices. They're a little bit too cheaply made to have plates that would be removable and replaceable. Okay, and we're screwing into plastic here. So as always, the tip for that is drive it backwards until we hear a little click, and then forwards, and then we find the thread that it came out of, and rather than cutting a brand new thread in the plastic, which would be a bad thing. So there we go, that's what they're like. I'm not going to bother taking off that side because it's going to be the same story in there. A ceramic heating element screwed onto the bottom of the casting. But yeah, difficult to clean is the takeaway from these things. So if you are the kind of person who really cares about having everything spick and span, then these kind of things probably aren't for you. As I say, it does heat up to well above boiling hot when it's in use, so there's no hygiene issue here as such. It's just a cleanliness thing.
Anyway, I hope this has been interesting or entertaining. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.